Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
I'm floating on air, I'm up in the clouds.
Hey, Tim Beckley, what are you doing way up there?
Well, I'm floating on air, like the saints used to do.
but Tim, everyone knows that you're no saint.
What do you mean? How do they know that?
Well, from listening to Exploring the Bizarre, of course.
Oh, geez, I didn't know that it showed. But what are you going to do? Tonight we're going to have both sides of the spectrum. We've got naughty and nice, right, Tim?
Yeah, I suppose you could put it that way. We have two fantastic guests. We have with us Michael Grosso and Emily Menhouse-Stakely. Now, Michael Grosso, PhD, is a scholar, teacher, author, and painter whose interests span physical research, metaphysical art, the parapsychology of religion, and primarily philosophy. Now, Michael received his PhD in philosophy and studied classical Greek at Columbia University and has taught at City University of New York, Marymount Manhattan College. He has published books on topics ranging from life after death to the mythologies of end time, and he's on the board of directors of the American Philosophical Practitioners Association, and is a past editor of the journal for that association. Now, we'll be talking tonight about a lot of different subjects, but Michael has a book out called The Man Who Could Fly, St. Joseph and the Mystery of Levitation. Now, as well, he's written Experiencing the Next World Now, Frontiers of the Soul, Exploring Psychic Evolution, Soul Making, Uncommon Paths to Self-Understanding. And he wrote that along with Raymond Moody Jr. And The Final Choice, Playing the Survival Game. Now, of course, with us is Emily Menhouse-Stakely. Now, Emily says that after growing up in a haunted house and the good Lord allowing her to have the gift of discernment, that is, the discernment of spirits, she became interested in the paranormal at a young age and has been an investigator for over 15 years. Now, she got her start with Kentucky Paranormal Investigators, and from there, she was recruited to be on the television show The Paranormal Journeys, which will be filming its fifth season this summer. Now, this year, during her off-season of filming, Emily decided to do a winter project with her best friend and founded Frick and Frack Paranormal. Boy, say that 5 times fast. They're working on a small documentary series on what is Bonnie Fiddle, now known as Portsmouth, Ohio. We'll have to ask about that one. I love that name, Bonnie Fiddle. As well, Emily has a YouTube channel called The Dirty Ghost Box, which features EVPs of the not-so-genteel nature. Emily says that what used to be a hobby has now become my life, and I enjoy doing every minute of it. I love meeting new people and helping those find answers. So hopefully that we can find some answers tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
We're always seeking them out, Tim, aren't we?
That's right. I don't know if we ever find anything, but we have a good time in the process. It's not so much the end of the journey, but the journey itself.
Well, you know, Tim, I know our first guest tonight, Michael Grosso.
Oh, really?
I haven't seen him for many a full moon, but Michael used to come to our Fortean Society meetings in what is now a vacant lot next door to where I publish my massive library of books on the paranormal. It's now a lot with rubble in it, I must say. We're waiting to see what they might do with it because they're putting up skyscrapers all over the area here. It's nothing but pounding and sawing all day long. And I think Michael spoke for the group. John Keel was the organizer, and I was on the board of directors. And I remember he was a very articulate spokesperson. And after the meetings, we would usually venture down to Miss Kay's, some of the members, including Peter, who does our YouTube channel, to have a meatball sandwich. But unfortunately, Miss Kay's is no longer there either. In fact, the whole area has totally changed. Michael, now, were you when you came to the meetings? Were you living in Connecticut then?
No, I never lived in Connecticut.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I was living. In those days, I think I was living in Riverdale, in the Bronx.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you still reside there now,
village.
or? Yeah.
No, I'm living in Virginia now, in Charlottesville, famous Charlottesville.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I must say my memory is a little faulty. It's been many years, but why don't you take us back to the beginning of your interest in what would you call this? You're not really a paranormal researcher. Are you more of a person that's into consciousness and awareness?
Well, yeah, I don't know what I am. I mean, I do a lot of different things, but how I got into this is the fact that I always have, once in a while, I've had odd experiences, and occasionally I've had really striking, what we would call paranormal experiences, precognitive and telekinetic or psychokinetic. I would say those two areas. Telepathy. I've been attacked by ghosts in haunted houses. So actually, I don't remember. Half the time, things come up and I say, "Oh yeah, I remember. I had something like that 35 years ago or something." Although I have written up some of the more outstanding experiences, and I more or less keep having them, but not often, not frequently. I would never call myself a psychic. I'm just an ordinary guy who happens to be lucky enough from time to time to have some weird, strange experiences that helps me understand that folks, I'm more receptive, let's say, to other people's stories because I've had them myself. Whereas I think a lot of the individuals that are turned off by this field, more often than not, I've just simply never had or never noticed an experience. I think the big thing is having these experiences, and they open people up. But so that's pretty much how I got into it. And I was a student of philosophy and surrounded by guys and women who thought, these things are impossible. And I would say, I didn't say they were possible. I said I had the experience; they're actual. Yeah. So that sort of intensified my interest. The concept.
What were some of the earliest experiences you have? Can you tell us a couple of them?
Yeah, I can remember the very earliest experience I ever had. I think I had just moved around the corner to a new street. I was about 5 years old, and there was a kid on the block that I didn't know very well. Had no contact with him. I just knew who he was. And I still remember it, many decades ago, but I remember having a vivid dream of him playing ball with him. And I had never played ball with this particular kid. And I remember I woke up that morning with this vivid dream. Typically, precognitive dreams tend to be more vivid than usual. And so I had breakfast and I stepped out of the house. I mean, I was still just a little boy, but I was able to go out in the backyard and hang out in front of the house. First thing that happens when I step out, there's Johnny, this kid that I never really became friends with. He's bouncing a ball and he says, "Want to play ball? Want to play off the wall?" And it shocked me because I had just had this vivid dream. So that's the earliest one that I can remember. But then I suppose the ones I do remember more vividly were more. Also, you see, what got me into this was listening to my mother tell me stories. She told me ghost stories. She told me of one of her great aunts discovering in her house like clothing that was unwoven and then woven into different kinds of clothing. It was like just a very strange story of a haunting that produced strange physical effects. And I remember listening to that when I was very young. I also remember stories about Padre Pio, the Catholic saint. That's how I got into the saints. And there were books lying around the house about often. I still have some of them. After my mother died, I collected some of my mother's stories. There was one in particular that made a really vivid impression on me about a statue that cried in Italy in 1954, and it was like headlines all over the world for 4 days straight. This statue was gushing tears. Everybody, from many miles away came and saw this. Doctors, chemists came on the scene immediately, collected the tears and analyzed them, discovered that there were actual tears. So stuff like that I had from a pretty early age. Then in my years, even as a graduate student, I remember having some very striking experiences. I remember an encounter with an apparition of my deceased grandmother with a woman right next to her that I didn't recognize it, but sort of looked like my mom. I remember just spending it was a very hot night, and I couldn't sleep in the bed, so I went into the living room and drifted off, and just as the sun came up, I opened my eyes, and there this apparition of these two people. One I recognized, my dead grandma, and the other I didn't. So later that day, I called my mother, and I described the woman that I didn't recognize. And my mother told me to come to the house, which I did in a day or so, showed me a big old family picture, which I had never seen, her family. And I immediately picked out the woman that I saw, and it happened to be my grandmother's sister, whom I had never seen or met, and who never saw or met me. And so that definitely made an impression on me. How could I dream of somebody I've never seen and then recognize a photograph of her? So that's a rough idea and of some of the experiences that I've had, and which made an impression on me. And at the same time, while a graduate student at Columbia University, I would now and then tell a story like this to some of my buddies, and they'd say, that's impossible. I remember one of them saying, that would imply dualism. And in those days, dualism was a sin against the Holy Ghost of philosophy. You're not allowed to believe in the mind. You have to believe only in the body, and the mind is some kind of weird accident. So that got me going, too, the absurdity of these, dogmatic claims that I got from smart aleck guys, young philosophers like myself, who were convinced that these things were impossible when I knew from my own experience that they were quite real. So anyway, that's a taste of my background.
I was just getting ready to say that had to grate on your nerves just a little bit to hear people just dismiss your own personal experiences when, like you said, well, I know this happened to me, so I mean, I can't say that it was supernatural, whatever, but I can't dismiss that this didn't happen, to my experience.
Exactly. I wasn't annoyed then. I took it as it was just, to me, was a joke, because I knew I was right in terms of my experience. Oddly enough, I get more annoyed today when I read or notice how the mainstream, how the press can be very often obtuse and dismissive about things that now I have a deep knowledge of, that I've spent a good part of my life talking to other people who have had these experiences and reading a bottomless literature. I mean, it's endless. I'm a fanatic in terms of books. I've collected books that are, I've got thousands of books, and many of them, not all of them, are on these matters. And I'm constantly finding stuff that I read years ago or things that I left out and that I haven't read. And so, I get annoyed when I see that kind of unawareness and lack of interest on the part of some, not everybody. Ordinary, everyday people are more open to these things. It's only intellectuals who have been talked into or trained themselves to believe or they've invested themselves in a certain way of looking in the world. And they're a little more rigid in their outlooks, unless they get popped over the head by real experience.
Yeah, I was impressed by the experience that you wrote about on your recent blog on was it Consciousness Unbound, where you referred to, let's say it was April 23rd, 1971, when you were living in Greenwich Village. And do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I know that John Keel wrote one time that he had a very similar experience. I don't know if it was around the same time, but it was something that I remember that he had mentioned. Yeah.
I don't know that. Yeah, no, that experience was a striking one for me. That one really opened up my mind because, well, all right, I'll just very quickly recount it. First of all, it was, the date you got right. It's April 23rd, 1971. I was just about to get my PhD in philosophy, and I think that coincidence is interesting. And anyway, we're living in the village, sixth floor, 14 Bedford Street, and I'm listening to a piece of music with my girlfriend. It happens to be her birthday. And the piece of music is by John Coltrane, called The Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. Wild jazz, very difficult stuff to listen to. And even today, I don't have that one anymore, but I certainly remember it. And anyway, we're kind of listening into the music, and then I got up. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I go to the window and look out the window. It's a beautiful, crystal clear spring night. And I suddenly, I'm sort of at the window, kind of pumping my feet in rhythm with the music, and I look up, and suddenly I see a cluster, dazzling lights in the sky before me, and it seems like they're dancing or they're moving back and forth, almost in rhythm with my feet and with the music. And okay, that was striking, and so I'm staring at this for about a second and a half, and then I suddenly realized, what the hell am I looking at? This cannot be a plane. It's nothing. It's definitely out there. So I say, Jane, come over here, and she has the wits to raise the window to make sure it's no, freakish reflection. She sees the same thing. And then as we're both watching, and here's where it gets really odd. As we're both watching these lights, they stop that rhythmic pattern and shoot to the dome of Our Lady of Pompeii, which is this church, about 2 blocks, I suppose, would be north of Bedford Street, where I was living. In the village. It's a famous church. You can see it's still there in the village. And the lights, the cluster, that's all I can describe it as, a cluster of lights. They shoot over to the dome of the roof of the church, and they perch there, and they start beaming. And it seemed to me, it was perfectly obvious, they were beaming at us. While we're listening to the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, these lights appear, okay, and then shoot over to the top of a church, a Catholic church, Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. There's obvious connection, and so we're staring at these lights beaming at us, and then suddenly they stop, and in an instant, shoot in a classic UFO zigzag fashion north and vanish over the entire Empire State Building. Now, not over yet. The two of us are sort of stunned and electrified. I could feel we were like vibrating in this little apartment that I had on the sixth floor, I think it was. And so I said, let's go up the roof. And I don't know what prompted me to do that. I just wanted to get up to the roof and see if I could maybe see this thing in the distance. And lo and behold, there's a guy up the roof who, the name's Louis, lives in the building, and I had just turned him on to John Coltrane. So he looks at me, he says, did you see that? Before I even opened my mouth. 3 people witnessed this, and he noticed that the lights there was a kind of a pyramidal shape, and he also noticed the obvious fact that there was no sound whatsoever. That didn't register in my mind consciously. So that was the experience. Every time I used to see Louis years later when I moved, I'd go down to the village and I'd bump into him. He's still living there, and we'd say, "Hey, you seen any lights?" Like, it made a tremendous impression on me. And I always interpreted this, and it could be nonsense, but my sense was this was some kind of a joke, because it was trying to tell me, you're about to become a doctor. Doctor in Latin means wise. Okay, figure this one out. Figure us out. I mean, that's just my interpretation. I don't know if that's
well. Michael, I've spent a good deal of my life trying to figure out synchronicities. I just did a book, the Matrix of Philip K. Dick, and the synchronicities, paranormal synchronicities of Tim Beckley. And I mean, things that are just totally bizarre. And I'm not talking about thinking of somebody and they call on the phone the next day. I mean, I'm talking about hardcore things, just like you just described. There is a definite link between synchronicities and UFOs and the paranormal, which led to Philip K. Dick to believe that we are living in a computer simulation, or that we're actually living in parallel worlds at the same time. And I kind of go along with that to some extent. Now, I know we're coming up on a commercial break, but there's an incident. You talk about the dome there. There's an incident that took place in Egypt over a church there, Christian church, where this
Coptic church.
Yeah, Coptic church, with this vision of the Virgin Mary appeared for numerous nights in a row, and they took photographs of it, and I think video or film at the time. You're probably familiar with that incident.
Yeah. And absolutely. I interviewed about 5 witnesses who lived in Jersey City, because there was a Coptic church in Jersey City. Yes. I was teaching there. So yeah, I know all about that. That went on for about 2.5 years.
Well, that's I'm not a religious person at all, but that's a remarkable incident. I mean, there is something to Fatima and the appearance of the Virgin Mary, whether it's religious or spiritual or UFO related.
All right. Well, we have to take our break now, Tim. So we will be right back in just a few minutes.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz, and remember, if you have any questions for our guests, just call in, text us, use your amazing psychic abilities. We don't care. We just want to hear from you. Our guests would like to answer your questions as well, if you have any. So, Tim, why don't we bring Emily into the conversation now? I know that she's been anxiously awaiting her turn on the show. Let's bring in Emily Menhouse Stakely.
Well, hello. I am so anxious. Hello, Emily. I'm so anxious to hear about the dirty ghost box.
Yeah, you're bringing a naughty girl now, right?
Of course, I would be. But I just wanted to mention, you're from Kentucky, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, my daddy was from Kentucky. In fact, I used to drive down there with my parents. They had a 1947 Oldsmobile, and they would put me in the back of the car, and it would take about 3 or 3.5 days to get down there. Now, I had one of my earliest strange experiences, at around the age of 3. And in fact, we could say that perhaps a guardian angel or some sort of a being saved me from a certain death. We were driving along, and it was rather late at night, and as I understand it, there was a fog covering coming in, and they were up. And my dad was driving, and my mother was quite a. I mean, I'm sure she was telling him every turn to take and to slow down. And they were up in the mountains, I guess, on the way there. Winding hills, and I'm in the back of the car, and the fog is rolling in, and my father wants to continue driving because there isn't that far to go, and my mother insists that we stop, immediately right away. And if my mother said something, my father would certainly agree to it. So anyway, they stopped, and we pulled over to the side of the road and stayed there for the rest of the night. And when the sun broke through the cloud covering in the morning, it turns out that we were on the very end of a cliff, and another 2 or 3 feet, we would have been down in a ravine somewhere, and I would not be co-hosting the show here. So that was one of my first paranormal experiences. But it goes back a little further than that, because it turns out that my grandfather on my father's side of the family had a ghostly experience. Now, my dad's family were very strict Baptists, and Baptists don't talk about spirits and ghosts and phantom unless they bring it up in conjunction with them being demonic or a tool of Satan, which I don't even think they really would have done, because they were not I don't think educated in the ways of the other world and parallel dimensions and all. Anyway, according to my what I heard, my grandfather only talked about this once and would never describe what happened again. But he went behind the barn, and there was a headless horseman. Now, one would think, well, it's a Ichabod Crane or something like that, but no. Apparently, there were. As I understand it, Kentucky was supposed to be neutral during the Civil War, but they were more, I think, influenced by the South than anything else. And it was, I guess, a damn Yankee who shot off the head with a cannonball or something of this a particular soldier. And my grandfather got a glimpse of this. And, apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, a headless ghost are not that unusual.
I mean, I have not ever seen a headless person. What I usually see ghosts are white faces or a black mist, shadowy figure. I have never personally have seen a headless ghost.
Well, I don't think I don't think they're that quite that frequent. It's not like everybody sees them. But
no.
Let's go, Leah. Let's go back to the beginning here. Tell our listeners a little bit, a lot about yourself. I mean, how did you become the darling of the Kentucky paranormal and ghost hunters? And what would you consider yourself, a psychic researcher or?
Well, I'm not a psychic researcher, but I do what I research the most is EVP and voices through digital recordings, as doing paranormal investigations and getting correspondence through spirit communications, such as ghost box or spirit box is what they call it. I do have a gift of discernment that God gave me when I was young. I did go to Bible college and graduated with a bachelor's in theology and a bachelor's in Christian education, and then furthered with a master's in Christian education. But I discern spirits, like I see things. I started when I was young. I had a spiritual warfare class in college, and some weird things started happening during that time, during that class. It wasn't just myself. It was some other people in the classroom also. Actually, I saw so many weird things that happened in my own home and at church and other places. I prayed against it for a long time. Then I stopped seeing these things. And then probably about 5-6 years ago, I started, praying again for it. I feel like I've matured and could handle some things, because some things in the spiritual world is very heavy. And I think that, too, if we actually ever saw a glimpse of the true spiritual world that goes on, our brains could not comprehend it. We could not handle it. But as the years have gone, now I've started seeing things again. I try to help people and find answers in these homes. But ultimately, what I do, I don't see things all the time, but I usually, speak or analyze EVP. And I have a lot on SoundCloud from the different locations that I've gone to, and on YouTube. The Dirty Ghost Box that's on YouTube is Ghost Box Sessions. I actually have 2 more episodes I'm getting ready to put up on there of going to these locations and trying to communicate with spirits through radio frequencies that play through all the stations within like a second of each other. Very hard to pick up voices through these things. Once you start getting voices through them and I start getting responses and I feel like there's something trying to communicate, I'll start asking for cuss words because, I think, there's only one word that you can say on the radio that's acceptable as hell. And everything else is not.
Oh, man, no, there's no limit here. We're not where, the FCC hides in the closet when we come on. This is not, And remember, we broadcast live from Sin City, Las Vegas. So by all means, we don't need to stick cotton in our ear.
Well, I start asking for cuss words, and believe me, I've gotten a lot of responses on there. I've gotten a lot of sexual responses. I've gotten cuss words, children. I have one spirit that keeps popping up that follows me from place to place. Sometimes his name's Robert. He always shows up, says his name to me. I have to ask him to leave a lot of times. But that's what I do. And I grew up in a haunted home. My parents denied it when I was young. Some things happened with, I don't know, the handful of times I stayed in my room when I was young. I even had these dressers that had like little clasps on them, like you could pull the drawers out. And these little things would start jingling at night, all of them. Jingle, jingle, jingle. And they would wake me up and I'd get scared. I mean, even saw illuminations of the hallway turned green, like a bright green. I remember screaming and saying, help, when I was probably 7 or 8, and my mom came down. I don't even know if she saw the hallway or not, but I was telling her about the hallway. She said, green's a pretty color. Yeah. Like they totally denied anything that happened. Then we move, and then when I'm like a junior, senior in high school, like almost 10 years after everything happened, my dad starts telling me, yes, this is what happened. Yes, those things happened. The voices you heard happened. There was at nighttime in our basement, you would hear this big boom, and then you'd hear like a metal pipe, like it's rolling, 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 and then it would hit the wall. And then the wall was my side of the house, and that whole side of the house would shake. And my door would slam shut. But all that when I was a child, that never happened. Never, ever happened until we moved. And I was in high school getting ready to graduate. That's when my dad and my mom finally came clean on everything. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, okay. Did any of your parents admit that they may have had the same kind of abilities that you have, because as Michael pointed out, at the first part of the show, a lot of times these things do tend to run in families.
I believe my dad does to a certain degree. He's very, I respect my dad. He has a lot of wisdom. I go to him over spiritual things, and he believes me when I see the things that I tell him I see sometimes. My mom believes me too, but I think my dad, I'm Pisces and my dad is Pisces. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, being water signs. But I believe that my dad has seen some things over the years. He just doesn't communicate it as well as I do. Mm-hmm. He's a different generation. He keeps things internally instead of, telling everybody what he saw or how he feels or what happened to him. So,
well, it was nice of him though to finally admit to you
yes,
years later that that these things were going on and that you just weren't a crazy kid.
I know. I mean, I seen a picture came off our wall. I mean, plain as day. Like, it didn't just fall off the wall. It came. Talk about levitation. It came off the wall and sat in the air for a moment and then fell to the floor. It was above our fireplace. And I was in the hallway going to my bedroom, and my mom was back there trying to pick out clothes. And I just remember having this feeling to turn around, and I turned around and I saw that, and I told my mom about it and everything. It was, I mean, shattered, glass everywhere and stuff. And she didn't believe me over that. But I was young. I was the only person to see it. But that's remembering that time that that thing came off the wall and it sat there for a moment and then went to the ground. It terrified me as a kid. And then they're telling me no, it didn't happen. So, but I'm glad that eventually they finally said yes, it did. So they actually believe that this spirit that was in that house followed us to our new home that we built. The first night that all of us stayed in that house, my bedroom was above the garage. And we had about 100 paint cans in the garage at that time. And in the middle of the night, you hear boom, 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 boom. And like, oh my goodness, what's going on? It was so loud and so scary. My dad even got his gun out. And we go down to the basement thinking all these paint cans had fallen over and everything, and nothing. There was nothing there. We prayed over the home. We anointed the doors and windows and everything. And then after that, nothing ever happened again living in my home. So
just the spirit letting you know that he hadn't forgotten about you, even though that you tried to get away from him.
Yeah. Yeah. I always wanted to go. I drove by that house I grew up in not too long ago, took some pictures. I'd love to go back in that house and find out who's there and if anything happens there, because it was a creepy home. There was an old lady that lived there that passed away in the house. My dad, even before he got married, he lived there several years, and he would hear people talking and people walking upstairs, and nobody's upstairs and things. So I was curious if that still goes on there.
Well, yeah. That's a lot of energy taking place, there. So I mean, you would think it would be something still hanging around.
Well, I mean, we had friends that would come and spend the night and wouldn't stay. And one of my brother's best friends remembered seeing me. He thought it was me. Walked past my brother's room and heard all these kitchen cabinets opening and shutting and stuff. And he was really thirsty, and he was scared to get up because he's staying at his buddy's house, our house. And so he finally gets up and goes to the kitchen, and there's nobody in there. So needless to say, they called his parents. They came and got him at like 2:00 in the morning, and he never stayed again.
Oh
yeah.
Gosh.
Well, Emily, this kind of brings up the point. Is it the homes that are haunted, or are they following you?
Well, I think that spirits, if you want to talk about like in a demon possession, it can, this is not a possession. I would call it an oppression, but they inhabit lands, people, or animals. So I think that it would possibly something that followed us because it was attached to our home or our family dynamic. But then when we did the things that we needed to do to get rid of it, it went back to what it was familiar with. So I believe that it went back to the land it came from and possibly has done things there. But I won't ever truly know until I get back into that house and find out. But I don't know who lives there. And I don't know if they would be open to let me come.
Where
was
in
the
Ashland,
Kentucky. Ashland, Kentucky.
Ashland. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And were there other places around there that were? I mean, was it like on the haunted Indian land, or
well, we have a
place where there had been a Civil War battle or anything like that?
We have a lot of Adena burial grounds. I used to be the residential paranormal investigator for the Seton Manor that's in our historical district down by our Ashland Park. It's very haunted. It's probably one of the most haunted locations I ever investigated ever in my life. And we got the original blueprints from this house. We have Adena burial grounds that are in Central Park. Well, I got these old maps from back in the late 1800s, and these burial grounds extended all the way down Bath Avenue, which is the historical district that the Seton Manor sits on. And then on the blueprints of the home, it says Adina in the basement. And then it had a big, huge X on it. So I don't know if they built over top of that or they removed the Indian burial grounds and put the remains somewhere else. But that house is extremely haunted. I mean, you get everything in that home. You get poltergeist activity, you get your voices, you get shadow figures, you get full body apparitions. That house is amazing. It's for sale too by now, though. So if anybody wants to buy, it's on Zillow.
Well, I mean we've heard of some places. I mean, we've had some guests on the program here that have investigated a few places that are so haunted that they've seen things levitate around the room and a refrigerator fall over. I mean, just some remarkable things going on. Now, how did you realize that you could actually pick up EVP or voices? I mean, were you sitting around the table with a tape recorder or something one day? Or
well, what happened with that was that growing up in that home that I grew up in, and you could hear those voices and things in that house. As I got older, I started thinking, if I heard these voices audibly with my own ears, there's somehow or something I can record. And I took it was a tape player. It was one of those great big huge ones. My brother and my cousin were doing some tape recordings and stuff of my grandma's house, but it was a huge tape recorder. And I wish I had the tape now, and I hit record on it, and I just started like talking like I normally talk, like in any kind of conversation. Actually, I like to record mostly when we're not even paying attention to spirits. Like if we're just in a daily conversation, or if we're in a location and everybody starts talking and cutting up, I get more EVPs through us not even paying attention to the ghost or trying to find answers than actually asking direct questions to them. But I had this recorder at my grandmother's house, and it was on the table, and I started recording. And then when I played it back, I heard a voice in there that said, hello. And I know I didn't say hello. And I was probably I was younger than that. I was probably 16 maybe at the time. And then as I got older and then got more involved in the paranormal, probably in my mid-20s, I started getting into the digital recorders. And it had some recorders, laying around. But really, truthfully, in my 30s is when I really got involved with it. And I have the best recorder of all time. These paranormal investigators use this old school Panasonic RRDR60, which I'm not a huge big fan on it, but they're like $1,200, $1,500 now. I think they were built in 1998. But I use Olympus WS400 digital recorder, and I have several. I have like 6 of them total. They are amazing. Class A EVPs all the time. Direct, I mean, you name it. I have it on SoundCloud. If you go to SoundCloud /Frick and Frack Paranormal, all one word, you can hear a ton of EVPs. Every one of them on there, except maybe 2 or 3, is directly from Olympus recorder. So that's my go-to. So
the type of device that you have makes a difference?
I think so. The Panasonic RRDR60 that everybody uses, even on these TV shows, other TV shows, it has a lot of white noise playback. And then when you play it back right there in front of a customer or anything, to me, I feel like the responses could be misleading. I use amplified earbuds or headphones when investigating, so I hear everything 100 times stronger than anybody else. But a lot of times, if you play that back, they think it says one thing right there in person. But if you take that piece and you take it home, you evaluate it, it says something totally different. With the Olympus WS400, if you play it back with my amplified earphones, you can definitely hear what's being said. Unfortunately, without the earbuds or the headphones, the Olympus speaker does not play back loud enough for you to actually hear it audibly without any type of equipment to enhance it. But
Yeah, that's one thing. I noticed in listening to a lot of these VPs is that you could interpret them in several different ways. I mean, you couldn't, like if two or three people would sit there and listen to the playback and would hear something different. Now I knew actually there was a fellow by the name of Stuart Robb, who's long since deceased, and he was doing this back in the 1960s. And I went over his house. He lived in Anaheim, California. And in those days, the messages, if you want to call them messages, were just a couple of words. Now I've noticed that they've gotten a little bit more detailed. Is it the technology that's improved it, or have the spirits become more technologically advanced?
I think it's the actual technology and all of these frequencies that we deal with. A lot of times, spirits like to communicate through frequencies. So the more frequencies they have, and the more that we have increased in technology, then obviously we're going to get more responses. So I think that we've come a long way compared to Thomas Edison days and the 60s and the 70s and things. And there's more than one way to communicate spiritually with a ghost, and with them to communicate with us. And plus,
I remember. I was just going to say, I remember in the old days, Michael, maybe you do too. There was the Spirit Com. You remember this fellow that used to receive messages, and I can't remember who they were from, but it was.
I remember that.
Yeah. And it has
name.
like, yeah, I do too, but it'll come to me by the end of the show, I'm sure. But
Right.
Okay, but what's unusual about your messages or tapes is that the ghosts are often very blatant in the language that they use.
Yeah, well, that's with the ghost box, and I ask for it. So I mean, I tell them to say a cuss word, and they say it back to me. I mean, they say a lot of sexual terms too. I don't ask for sexual terms. I'm not the naughty person, but they they say it to me.
Well,
I don't know.
Let me determine that.
Okay.
Well, I've heard a couple of your tapes. They use the word piss somewhat frequently.
Piss off.
Piss off.
All right, with those words, Tim, we're going to have to interrupt it and go to our top of the hour break. So when we come back, we'll continue with more naughty words on Exploring the Bizarre.
Shucks, censored again.
Exploring the Bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight we're talking with Michael Grosso and Emily Menhouse Stakely. Now, Michael, I wanted to talk to you about your book about levitating saints, the man who could fly, Saint Joseph and the Mystery of Levitation. Now, I know that you were talking earlier about like some of your fellow philosophers who were kind of making fun of some of the experiences that you had, and I could see how some people would have doubts about things like ESP and telepathy and things like that. But when it comes to something like levitation, I mean, there is a real physical phenomena that if you've got somebody, like floating over your head with no discernible wires, that's a little bit more difficult to dismiss.
well, it's also a little more difficult to accept for many people. But I mean, it's all based on what you know. I mean, experience. In my case, I already, first of all, I knew something about poltergeists, and I knew there were all kinds of levitation, not just bodily, but objects that levitate, that behave in ways that are counter-gravitational. But I myself had two experiences, which I'll just briefly describe. One was I think it was at some parapsychological conference. I got together with two people, and we put our hands on a table that we were sort of taking a break and between lectures, and we were in one of our rooms. We put our hands on that paper, on that, it was a small table. It took off. And it actually, I mean, we were touching it, and but it just got up and it moved around, and it went right through the door and was running up and down with us chasing it, barely touching it, up and down the hallway in this hotel. It was really an amazing experience. So that blew my mind. And then the other experience, which I'll just mention again briefly, was an experiment in a class. You guys probably know about a game that kids play, light as a feather.
Yes.
Where they touch each other, and one of them may float up in the air or something. So this was one of my students mentioned it in a class. It was a team-taught course on human personality and its unusual abilities or something. I've forgotten the name of it. That's how we got into this business of trying experiments. So we tried a light as a feather with a 200-pound ex-Marine and 4 ladies who just touched him on with the backs of their 2 fingers around the knees and around the elbows. And after breathing in unison and chanting a few moments, I said, "Lift." And to my utter amazement, and everybody's amazement, the entire class, including the Marine, I'll never forget the look on his face, up in the air he went, as far as those girls could reach. They made no effort. There was no pressing. They just touched him. It was just like touching a little cup on a Ouija board. You know, if you've had the experience, you touch it and it moves. There's some kind of unconscious force. But a 200-pound Marine, without any effort, that was a striking experience. So
yeah, I could verify. I could verify that happens because we've done the same experiment ourselves, and up they go.
Right. I mean, no, I have to say, I tried to do it many other times. I never succeeded. But that one time that I did succeed was because the class, we were in rapport. We used to meditate together, chant together. And so we had that rapport, and that's the only explanation why I only succeeded once. But, it's not that I tried it every time we had a class, but I tried it many times and without any success. But anyway, as far as Joseph of Cupertino, he's probably one of the most interesting cases on record, not only for levitation, but for a whole range of paranormal phenomena. And the interesting thing about Joseph was that he couldn't control the levitations because he was embarrassed. As many other saints would levitate and they'd get totally embarrassed. They'd pray very hard, and the ability would tend to go away. But not Joseph. For 35 years, he would be responsive and go into ecstasy. The important thing to remember is he never did this unless he was in an unusual state of mind. He was in an ecstatic state. And what would trigger an ecstatic state could be anything. Someone could say, "Oh, how beautiful God's sky is today, brother." Yeah, wow, up in the air he'd go. There are so many stories, that I record in the book that are totally entertaining, strange, and incredible. But you have here at least 150 eyewitness sworn witness testimony about Joseph's phenomena. for a period of 35 years. He was called up by the Inquisition several times, but not because there's any doubts about the phenomena. What they wanted to know was his attitude toward these phenomena. Because if he had the wrong attitude, that would imply that, and this is just stupid, narrow-minded on the part of the 17th century church, that it had to be the devil that was doing it. So there was no question about the witnesses. One of the great popes, the same pope that was having a hard time with Galileo, witnessed Joseph levitate. And the popes don't just make up stories, and 150 eyewitnesses. In fact, these are 150 written down eyewitnesses. My calculation is that for 35 years he was levitating in public on numerous occasions. People came from all over Italy to see this because he was famous for his holiness and his healing powers and his levitations and his amazing telepathy. He was so good at reading people's minds that his superiors would tell him, he said, "How about easing it off on Joseph? Take it easy. Stop exposing us." Like if someone was not thinking of the right thing while they were saying prayers, they were thinking about dinner or something, he'd catch them out and say, "You're thinking about those chestnuts that you picked this afternoon." And so anyway, so Joseph's quite an amazing case of an embodiment of the supernormal abilities, a whole range of them. And I'm very interested in trying to understand, two things. What's the psychological background of this, and what does physics have to say about it? And it turns out there are quite a number of physicists that are interested in levitation, and some whom I've gotten to know and have even suggested ideas to me, which I discuss in the book, possible explanations of how full bodily levitation is possible. But I think this is an enormously interesting phenomenon because it's really an in-your-face challenge to your understanding of physical reality. How are these things possible? It tells us something about the theory of religion. It suggests that all of the many miracles reported in all the different religions, there may be something, they may have grains of truth to them. Of course, Joseph is not the only case where you have good eyewitness testimony, and not the only religion, because you have a rich tradition of levitation in Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And there are a whole bunch of books out about levitation among famous Buddhists, and a lot of artwork that goes back to the 17th century, illustrating endless varieties of paintings of flying Buddhist monks. So, and then you have it among the mediums. D.D. Home, the most famous physical medium, is said to have levitated at least 150 times. And then there are these cases of sort of what I call slow motion levitations, where I had one guy in a radio show phoned in and described how he had fallen off a boat with a bunch of friends, and he was about to go under and get sucked under by this huge propeller when he suddenly slowed up in the air, and everybody on that boat, his three friends, witnessed and confirmed the fact that somehow he slowed up just enough that he could grab a rope and save himself from being destroyed. So I've collected quite a number of stories like that. There's a lot of levitation going on in sports and dance, mm-hmm. But it's sort of interwoven with high performance, and it's not quite as dramatic as a mystic or an ecstatic poet or someone who literally gets carried away and goes up in the air. So it's a fascinating subject, and one that really does challenge our understanding of the nature of the relationship between mind and body, which is my philosophical sort of interest in this whole subject. I mean, what is the relationship between the mind and the body? Mainstream science tends to lean toward materialism and think that the mind is just a byproduct, a feeble byproduct of the mind. I think it's the opposite. We cannot escape. Everything we experience is through our minds, and our minds are shaping our realities constantly, and every now and then in very dramatic ways. And it's those dramatic ways that the mind impacts on the body that particularly interest me, and that I keep collecting case histories and looking out in my own life for indications of these strange phenomena.
Well,
So anyway,
well, Michael? Michael? Is there a secret to levitation? I mean, is this particular saint? Did he have some quality? I mean, certainly,
yes.
Just believing in God or something isn't going to make you float off the floor.
Absolutely not. Yeah, belief has virtually nothing to do with it. I mean, belief is an important variable in parapsychology. But belief means more than just a kind of a pale cognitive assent that something is real. No, I think the secret is undoubtedly, I think that the secret to the whole range of extraordinary phenomena is a special type of altered state of consciousness that we're all familiar with, more or less, ecstasy. I mean, have you ever been totally happy where you practically feel like you're about to fly? You get good news. You suddenly realize you're in love with somebody and you're walking along and you feel light as a feather. I mean, we've all had those experiences of lightening up, and that's a matter of degree, because we may be carried away for a moment because, we got a lucky break in some part of our lives. But a mystic like Joseph or some, Buddhists, mystics or other types are constantly focused. Their minds are focused to the exclusion of everything outside of them on a single idea. And it's usually an idea that's exalted, elevated, It's as though there's a state of mind that you can get into where a metaphor becomes a reality, where we say, I was so carried away by the sight of that beautiful painting. Well, in the case of some of the great, not all obviously, but some of the great mystics or inspired people of any stripe and color get carried away in a profoundly more intense and convincing fashion. I think there's a matter of degree. I think there's a continuity, a spectrum of stages of mind where we're all slow, at the edge where we could slip off into something extraordinary. And that's why
have you heard any story? Have you heard any stories about like Native American shamans or shamans along the Amazon that have this ability?
Oh yeah, yes, I have, and I'm constantly finding new material, and I'm finding books that are written on this subject that I didn't even know. In fact, in the past year or so, even after my book came out, actually I've come out with 2 books on Joseph. I've come across some new books on the subject. Now, you say you guys have written a book, or one of you has written a book on levitation?
Well, yes, we have a fellow who is of military background, and he claims, Tim, you co-authored the book with him with Commander X.
Yes, that's correct.
That even the government is working on experimentation with levitation.
Wow.
So it apparently according to him inside Area 51, which we can't confirm certainly, and now even some of these UFO sightings. I mean, if you see these objects,
yeah.
they dart about the sky. Now some people say, well, it's teleportation, but it's a matter of moving from one spot to another almost instantaneously.
Right. No, there's no doubt that there's lots of accounts of various levitation effects. I mean, there's stories of abductees that are levitating.
Oh, yes. Well, how about
And
the woman Linda, who lives in the Lower Manhattan, who was supposedly floated outside of her window and went inside the spaceship, and it was witnessed from the street. Uh, in fact, I've
wow.
always had a lot of the works that I've written on the subject. I always make a parallel between what happens in a darkened seance room to what happens in at a UFO landing site. It's often very,
Mhm.
very similar in nature. So, did you have outside of that one very tremendous UFO experience that you described earlier in the show? Did you ever see anything else that would be in that category?
Uh, you mean a UFO-related
Well, UFO
levitation
or yeah,
phenomenon?
yeah. Well, either
Yeah.
one. Surprise us.
Yeah. No, I can't. No, the only really striking levitation things that I observed myself was that the story of that Marine that we
Yeah.
levitated, and then the object, the table that was astonishing and really quite striking. But I've heard stories. I mean, I have reports of various people who have had levitation experiences, and of course I've read extensively in the literature. There's
Uh-huh.
probably just in the Catholic literature alone at least 200 cases where there is decent eyewitness testimony of levitation. Joseph was the champ, and that's why I picked him, because there was so much eyewitness testimony. There's no way deny the reality of this. My book, when I first had it published, I had Oxford University Press had accepted the proposal, and I wrote the book for them, and everybody was gung ho for the book to be published. The last minute, some philosopher, nameless, crawls out of a corner and says, "We cannot have Oxford University Press cannot publish a book about a monk who's been flying around for 35 years." He didn't say the case that you've made, Grosso, is not valid. He said it just doesn't look good. In
Yeah.
other words, utter rubbish. So they gave me the option. If I tone it down, they'll publish it. I said, no way. I said, I wrote the book precisely
Well, how do
because
you
this
how
is
do you tone
dramatic.
how do you tone down a levitation? You only get 2 feet above the floor instead of 20.
Right, good, exactly. I mean, I didn't have to say anything. All I had to do was report and describe what other
Yes.
people were saying, and it was obvious. I never even had to conclude. Therefore, levitation, you have to be a moron not to see from all of these quotes that I provide that this is for real, unless you want to have some fantastic theory that everybody's lying or
Yeah.
everybody's
Yeah.
deluded, you see. I don't
Well,
believe
Mass
that.
hallucination.
don't you think that, I mean, this is what's in a lot of cases prevents science from moving forward? Because I mean, no, okay, you can be skeptical about something. There's no doubt about that. And if you haven't read any of the literature on levitation, you might say, well, Michael Grosso is,
Right. Yeah.
has made it up out of whole cloth or something like that instead of holy cloth. But I mean,
Right.
why not take the time to spend, like even half a day looking into something to
Yeah.
see if there's anything to it, and just say, no, my mind is closed. It can't possibly be that
Well, that's it.
way.
That's it. I mean, yeah, and many academics are really uh, invested in their way of looking at things. Their careers are based upon certain ideas that they've developed. And if you come along with something that doesn't fit, I've had so many interesting stories. I was thinking of writing a small book about just the different weird reactions to people when I present my book or present my ideas. Lots of folks are totally, open-minded and fascinated and curious. But those who are not, it's just very interesting to see how devious and how transparently absurd their responses are. I find that interesting, and it just tells us something about the rigidity of the cognitive apparatus of many people, especially those who are more educated, because they've got more at stake.
I'd read that book if you wrote it, Michael. That's that would be fascinating. I'd love to read that.
Do you think it's getting better or worse? Would you say?
This is a good question. I have a lot of friends in the field who have the feeling that there are signs of breakthrough. I mean, I have physicist friends interested in levitation. I know people that are interested in the UFO levitation connection, serious people. But I'm afraid I don't believe it's changing, because having studied the history of this subject, what I've found since the scientific revolution, going back to the 17th century, there have always been individuals, a minority of individuals, from the very beginning of the scientific revolution, who rejected the materialism that was part of the new science and said, no, there are many dimensions of experience that we have to take seriously, spirits and all that, and levitation, miracles, blah, blah. And I feel the same. I don't think, as you go from the 17th to the 18th to the 19th to the 20th, right into the 21st century, it seems to me it's the same ratio of a minority, often of the best people of a culture. I mean, Freud, Jung, and two of the great psychologists of 20th, they were interested in the paranormal. But
all right, Michael, I'm going to have to ask you to hold it right there, because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. So we'll continue this conversation when we come back on Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, here we are, Tim, at the bottom of the hour, less than a half hour to go. The time just always flies. We get to this point, and it's just like, where has the time gone?
Well, I have spent half the evening just a little bit above the recliner. I haven't told anybody this, but I didn't have to push the recliner back. I just managed to levitate a few feet above the floor, but I'm working on it. Maybe by the time we have Michael on the next time, I'll be a little bit more adept at floating on air. But for tonight, we'll just have to be content with a couple of inches. Although, who was it? D.D. Hume went out the window and came in the other window. That's probably the most famous, a case in spiritualism of levitation. Yeah, and in front of many witnesses. In fact,
and very sort of high class dudes too. That they're very intelligent, very wealthy, and not likely to make it up. But they could have conceivably been deceived in the darkness, semi-darkness. But I don't think so. I think he was the real thing.
Well, I did a book called Dark Seance about the Davenport brothers. Now, they didn't levitate. They didn't levitate themselves, but they would put them in a spiritualist in a medium box.
Cabinet.
Lock the cabinet. Lock the cabinet. Bind their hands together, and all the musical instruments would come up above the box out of an opening in the top and float across the room and play. Now that's
wild stuff. That's really wild.
That's wild stuff. And boy, did they! You talk about being persecuted. They were driven out of town. I think they were beat up by mobs a couple of times, thrown in jail. And one woman, I think, even felt him. Didn't she fall out of the balcony in Philadelphia or something, trying to get a closer look or grab one of the musical instruments or something?
Yeah. The spirits didn't rescue her on that occasion.
I guess not. She could have used a little bit of levitation, but
probably.
Anyway, Tim.
Well, I wanted to ask Emily. one of the instruments that you use is the Ghost Box, which now you have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but doesn't it like rapidly scan across various radio frequencies?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so now I know a lot of critics will say, "Oh, well, you're just picking up random voices," because I mean, phases, FM, AM frequencies. I mean, they're almost full to overflowing with broadcast. So, I mean, how can you tell the difference between if you're actually picking up something of a paranormal nature and not just some DJ on a wild streak?
Well, when they scan through these frequencies, it jumps through the available frequencies like within a fraction of a second. Like it goes so fast that you don't even have a time to get a syllable out. And as it scans, it gets like different transmissions, like static, white noise, and things like that, which words eventually start coming out, but you can tell when it is a spirit because, I mean, with my experience with the Ghost Box, and I've had very good experiences with it, I almost get full sentences each time. And now there's times where I'll get one sentence, not one sentence, but one word, 2 words responses. But I get very good responses through there. I get full sentences a lot of times. I was up in Columbus just this past April at the Circus House, which is also the Sells Mansion. I was staying in the carriage house there, and actually, I'll tell you, I saw something there. I saw this little boy, probably 7, 8 years old. He went across the kitchen there, and he had a dunce cap on. And it was odd. I'd never seen anything. It went so fast. Like when I see these things, it's extremely fast. And I decided I didn't do an EVP session in the carriage house. Now we investigated the actual circus house, and it's amazing. I have YouTube videos up about this location. It's never been investigated before, but it's Peter Sells. It's the first circus that was ever in the United States, the Sells Brothers Circus, before what was that? Barnum and Bailey Circus took over. But anyway, I did an EVP. I did a Ghost Box session there. I actually have a I got a touch lamp Bluetooth speaker, and you can touch it. It changes colors, and I try to get spirits to touch it to change. But I have Ghost Box responses on there, which is on my SoundCloud. It's that I picked up a kid's voice says, "Do you want to color?" I mean, the whole question, the whole thing there, as these frequencies are going through so fast. I mean, it's a fraction of a second, and it's through FM and AM. You can choose on the SB7 which one you want to use. You can sweep forward, you can sweep backward, but I get full senses that I asked if somebody got in, or I asked what color is the lamp. The lamp was red at the time. I get the response red. That's one word response back. I asked. I felt like somebody got pushed there. So I asked if somebody got pushed, and said Officer Thomas did it, is what it said. And a lot of the times too, through these frequencies. If you would be getting different channels, you would have different voices. When these voices respond back, especially in the full sentences, it's the same voice and it's consistent. And it's going through those frequencies in a fraction of a second. So you would think that you would get different pitches, different voices, female voices, men voices. But with the sentences, it's this consistent voice. So that's how I feel that, I'm actually talking something other than radio frequencies or other kind of transmission that's coming through.
Well, and plus, the whole reason that you have like the Dirty Ghost Box on YouTube is because you're getting responses a lot of times with words that shouldn't be broadcast over terrestrial radio. Right.
That's something else too. I want to tell you about this little boy with the dunce cap. I talked to the owner of the circus house. I had no idea that building, that carriage house, was a kindergarten classroom in the 1950s or 60s for at least 4 to 5 years, I think. And so, 40s and between the 40s and 60s, kids are in trouble. What do? They put a dunce cap on back then and sat them in the corner. So, I had no idea whatsoever that even took place there. And so then I did research on it afterwards, because mostly I researched about Mary Sells and Peter Sells that owned the home. And they had a very, very tumultuous marriage, divorced. It was a trial that lasted over a year. And it was a big to-do in Columbus back then. And so I researched more about that, but I didn't research about what else could have happened after like the early 1900s to that building, which I should have, but I didn't at the time. So when I saw this kid run through the kitchen like he did, I was like, like it always catches me off guard. Like I always see it when I don't expect it. And then to get the response that "Do you want to color?" ? Was awesome to me. Mm-hmm. That response is on SoundCloud too.
So now, when you had when you saw the kid run by mm-hmm. With the dunce cap, do you think that you were seeing an actual spirit or yes. a residual effect of like a past event?
It could be probably a little bit of both, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, that little boy might be tied to that place for some reason. He might have had some really bad times there since he's in a dunce cap. He might have had some really good times there. I don't know. But it could be both, really. It was a split second. I saw him run from left to right in that back part of the kitchen. He was like running to the corner, actually. So it was very unexpected. And then to find out that it used to be a kindergarten classroom, I want to say it was in the late 50s. I'm usually good with dates. I don't know why I can't remember this date right now. Was awesome to hear from the owner of the home. So, but I think it could be both.
Have you ever attempted? And I've been fascinated with the whole aspect of EVPs and radio communications, even phone calls allegedly from the dead. But I think one of the things that fascinates me the most is the group of people who have attempted to get visual impressions using video cameras, televisions that mm-hmm. are set off channel, things like that. Have you ever tried anything like that or thought about trying something like that?
Like what? Like what do you mean? Like setting up DVRs, like videos?
Yeah. Correct me,
Tim. Mark Macy. Yeah, Mark Macy right. From Colorado Springs. I mean, he supposedly has videos, and also the Scroll is a Scroll group in England that actually photographed. Yeah.
Right. It's called like what ITC. What is it? Gosh, I can't remember what that stands for.
Are you talking?
Go ahead, Emma.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, are you talking about like still images or video and things
like
that?
Well, video, yeah.
Well, out of all the years I've done this, I could probably say it's very rare that you actually catch anything on video or still images. Now, I do have a picture that used to be displayed at the Stanley Hotel. I don't know if it still is. I haven't been to the Stanley Hotel since 2015, but I did catch a still image of F.O. Stanley in the mirror there in the billiard room, and it is a magnificent image. It's awesome. When I captured that, I even went back out to the Stanley the next day. We tried to debunk it, couldn't debunk it. It's a really, really good picture of him. But out of all the years I've done that, that's the only still picture I ever caught of something in a photograph. On video, well, I've captured things at the Seton Manor that I spoke about earlier with the Adena Burial Grounds here in Ashland, Kentucky. It's neat because it was up on the second floor, and it was actually something peeking in the window and going back, and it illuminated in like a gold color. That's gonna be on season 5. People will see that. We're gonna be putting that into our season, one of our episodes. I'm not for sure which one yet, but it's peeking in and peeking out, peeking in, peeking out. And listen, this house is magnificent.
What does it look like?
It looks like a child. It looks like a child. It's illuminated in gold. It's peeking into the house and then peeking out. Now, listen, there's two big, huge, magnificent trees on the outside of this window. This is on the second floor of this house. This house is huge. It's a mansion home. It's like 8 bedrooms, 2-3 bathrooms. It was one of our Mr. Means was our second mayor of Ashland. It's his daughter's house, and they were into the brickyards. They had all the brickyards and the iron factories and stuff. Ironton, Ohio, is right across the river from me, so they had a lot of things to do with iron in Ironton. And so this house is huge. I tried to debunk this thing. I got in my car. I drove around the block. I took a flashlight up there. I truly believe it's paranormal. It is a little girl. It looks like a little girl to me, and she does it 3 times. Peeks and then goes back. Peeks, goes back, and then peeks really fast one more time and then goes back. And nobody. Go ahead.
Sounds like a little bit of levitation to me, wouldn't you say, Michael?
Well, yeah,
I mean,
levitation on the second floor there. So, but after doing the show and everything, now I came in on the Paranormal Journeys season 4, and we're getting ready to do season 5. But they've caught quite a few things on camera, which is awesome. I'm glad that they have. But that's the only thing that they captured with me. I don't do orbs. I don't know. I don't do the what do they call that? The pixelated images that make it look like there's faces. In like windows or some kind of reflection or off water or something like that. I hate to say that. I hate to turn anything down, but it ends up being arguments, and I just don't even look at those things anymore. Orbs can be so many other different things.
Yeah, but some of them are really strange. I mean, we've had some a guest on the show here who describe, orbs that are very, very intelligent, and sometimes you can even see an image inside the orb, and now, they shrink, and they grow in size. And
see, I love that there's people out there that does that, but I can't. There's it's just so many different.
Everybody
things
has a specialty,
you know.
Yeah, everybody has a specialty.
You bring me an EVP, you bring me some kind of voice that I can listen to, I will tell you. But orbs, I just can't, for some reason, I just can't get involved with that.
We got to get some talking orbs for you.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Hey, so tell us a little bit about the show.
The Paranormal Journeys, it's been around. This is obviously the 5th season. We have gone on a break for the past year. Our producer has gone through a really hard time. He lost his younger brother unexpectedly. So him and his family's had a rough year. We were supposed to start filming last fall, but we're getting ready to start filming now this summer and into the fall. Most of the team is located in Middlesboro, Kentucky, but some of them are in Knoxville. We are on Roku, which is, I don't have Roku, but the vanity code for it is capital G, capital H, number 0, number 5, and a capital T. Then we're on 22 channels in 8 different states, and supposedly we're still growing. Our biggest viewers come out of Knoxville, Gatlinburg, and Pigeon Forge area. So, but we are seen, you can be seen, you have to look at local listings, but in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, and I'm missing one. I always miss one. I think it's Virginia.
And are they like are they like half-hour episodes?
Yes, they're half-hour episodes for right now. Yes.
And can we find them on YouTube at all?
He did release YouTube season 1 about a year ago. He was getting ready to release season 2 on YouTube, and then everything happened with his brother and things, so he hasn't done that yet.
Yeah.
But we're getting ready.
Season one is up there somewhere.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Well.
And I think season 1 actually deals with a lot of the old South Pittsburgh Hospital, which is getting ready to be torn down. Or I've never investigated there. They have an apparition, I think, on that video. But they caught the ceiling fan ghost they have on there, which is neat. They actually have a video on there, and I'm bummed out I missed out on this. But actually, you can see a bed move, like somebody actually sitting on the bed and then getting up and sitting back down on the bed again. It is a really fantastic video to watch. But we're getting ready to be at Ross Opera House. It'll be my second time going back there. Actually, I'm so excited for it because I got one of my best EVPs there. It's a theater in Cynthiana, Kentucky. And I'm up on the balcony with one of my friends, Ryan. And then Tim and Jessica, they are actually on the Paranormal Journeys. We went to investigate this as just to investigate. They're down on the stage, and I actually feel something poke me on the back, and they're looking up at me in the balcony, and they said that they saw a shadow figure behind me, but couldn't tell if it was me moving or something behind me. And I said, I feel something just poke me in the back, and I have an EVP right there that says, turn around. And yeah, it's creepy. It's on SoundCloud too. But there's a woman that haunts that place. There was a young boy there. It's also a dirty ghost box location. There was a young boy that lived there. I think he was the old owner of the theater. I could be wrong on this. It's in the dirty ghost box explanation. Yeah. But he was very abused and raped and things. And even on the ghost box, it comes back, it says rape and stuff on it. So I don't know. Ross Opera House is excellent. I love theaters, though. If you tell me a theater is haunted, I will be there in a heartbeat. I don't know what it is about it, but I love them.
How do you find new places? I mean, do you have places that people haven't been to
That's
previously?
What I like. Yes, that's what I like to do. I'm not very drawn to these big, large locations that's already been on TV. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, some of them have been over and over again.
Yes. Ross,
speaking of over and over, though, we're Tim, we're coming up to the midnight hour here.
Yes.
I think.
It's going by so fast.
Yeah, well, this is our living room, man. You're welcome. You're welcome to stay and bring your dirty box anytime.
Yes.
But hey, so why don't we just go around the table one more time, Michael? How can people get a hold of you or find you or get your book?
Well, my books are available on Amazon, as most books are nowadays. So I even have an author's page, and I have about 5 or 6 books out there. But you can also find my blog, where I'm constantly writing about phenomena that are. I'm kind of trying to pick out phenomena that are really unusual, singular. I could talk about human singularities, and but only cases where there's lots of evidence. That's the kind of criteria I'm using.
Well, this show will be up. This show will be up on YouTube shortly, and well, we're getting towards the end of the evening here. So, Emily, what's the best way for people to find Frickin' Frack? Go to frickinfrack.com.
Unfortunately, no. But Frickin' Frack is on Facebook. Frickin' Frack's also on Instagram, and then my YouTube. And then what I promote the most is my SoundCloud, because it's all my EVPs that's on there. And that's soundcloud.com/Frickin' Frack Paranormal, and it's spelled out, and it's all one word. So, but any type of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anyway.
Well, it's easy to find all of us. I do believe, and Tim, we've got a new book out on the miracle plates of Nikola Tesla, and of course our UFO hostility book, and the evil agenda of some of the aliens at least. So we've been pretty busy, ourselves, and we get some great programs coming up in the next a few weeks. In fact, I am putting together a special SmackDown show of wrestlers who have had paranormal experiences as a tribute to my friend, Lady Suzanne, who was, of course, one of our psychics at the Occult Center, who wrestled professionally under the name of Vivian St. John. And we've got the alien artifact man coming on, John Peel. So we've got, with the alien glove, we've got some great shows coming up. And I want to thank our guests this evening. I want to thank Peter, Helen, and Carol for all their assistance and help, and of course Tina, who keeps us plugged into the internet, and of course you there, Tim Schwartz in Jasper, Indiana.
Yeah, we're having a really good storm right now. We sound like the opening and ending to the program. Just a little early over my microphone here. Oh, and I want to mention real quick. John didn't say this, but I guess he's going to be giving a talk there in New York City on June 22nd at the New York Open Center.
Oh, that's right. I might mention that if anybody is in the New York area. The New York Open Center. I'll be talking about levitation and what it means for the future of human evolution. I'm very interested in all of that.
Well, I
thank
believe
you very much. You guys are great. And
thank you, Tim.
That's right across the street from me, Michael.
Yeah.
You know
wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
We'll
see you there.
Check you out while I'm there.
Get back
all right.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Schwartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Schwartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.